Hello. Hello. Testing. Hi, everybody. Thanks for waiting for us. Sorry, we had some technical difficulties with the PowerPoint, which is kind of funny because we're doing a lot of technical stuff here, but it's the easiest thing that tripped us up. But isn't that how it always goes? Welcome to our camera, metadata, and color management demo with our Airy product line. My name is My name is Cassidy Pearsall. I'm with the Solutions Group, and I'm here with my colleague, Andrew George, application engineer. And we work in our Burbank office in our mixed reality stage, doing product development, R&D, and advising workflow practices for virtual production. So welcome, and we'll get started. So today we're going to be covering color management as well as our camera metadata plugin via Live Link for Unreal. So we'll be showcasing an Unreal asset in our integration. Later this afternoon, we'll also be having a lighting integration demo with dynamic lighting pixel map from Unreal. And we have a bunch of different content scenes provided to us from multiple content houses. So that'll be at 3:15. If you can come by, you'll see even more. But let's start with, I'm just going to ask you, buddy, what is color management?
So in this particular case, color management is the adjustment of a. Let me see if I can find a spot that's not going to feedback. There we go. In this case, we're using color management to manipulate the signal going from Unreal or from a signal generating source into a illuminating or otherwise color reproducing unit, right? So in this case, we're going from Unreal and coming into the Bromptons by way, or the row panels by way of a Brompton. So the management part is making adjustments in the signal path as opposed to making adjustments on the presentation systems or in the panels themselves. Oh, you changed the slide. Look at that. I think we are, yeah, sure. So in terms of our reproduction goals, one of the challenges, of course, with color management is identifying the intention. So is the goal to reproduce to a common point, like in an ASYS kind of workflow where you're going into AP1, AP0, whatever you want to call that, and having an ISYS, what is that? The IDT middle space ODT combination, or are you simply doing something that is a little more creative, where you will start with a more or less uncalibrated space and then just go to a target? So identifying the goals of a color management system is always good. It gives you that point at the end when you can go back and check to make sure that everything is in fact in line with where you were wanting to go with said system. Being a system, they're always kind of complicated, but the hope is that a little more design intent can be brought into such a system.
So, so I'll take it back a step and I'll talk a little bit about our system as well as our goals that we define for our system. I think we gotta mute one of us at a time. Yeah, thanks. So I'll go over our system a little bit and about what our contribution has been here. We have created a stage in partnership with Fuse Technical Group. They have done the technical integration and provided so much of this beautiful gear for us. We've got a great crew in the back at what is usually dubbed the brain bar, or the desk operation. And what we're doing here, closer, thank you. But anyways, so we're running vanilla end display out of Unreal. That is our source signal. We're not using any media server technology in this application, just for ease of use of the different features we were trying to get across. But our goals for this were really about aligning what our desk operators and artists saw on their monitors with what the final camera output would see to the audience. How do we align that color? So every piece of the process, every part of it, knows that they're looking at the same information. Everybody knows they're aligned, and everybody knows where they're going to. And how do you do that? You have to understand the limitations of your system. You have to understand what you can push, what you can't fall back on, and what what parameters you have to control. And as the slide says, this is not the default behavior of any system that you create. All of these virtual production stages are a big puzzle of different pieces of gear. What we're using here are camera and lighting systems, row BP2 panels, carbon on the top. We have Stipe as our tracking system feeding into Brompton LED processors. So that's a puzzle that we put together based on our experience, based on our vendor partners, and based on what we had available. All of these different virtual production stages will have a very different combination of gear. So you have to understand the limitations and how to put those in place. Default, they will all have a different native color source. They might have different native primaries between panels, and understanding those technical limitations will allow you to align your endpoints if you know where to take it through.
Next slide is good.
And then this is our kind of fun slide. What do you get when you have the absence of color management? You have a little bit of color whack-a-mole. You don't really have a good reference or a good fixed position to begin working off of. So as you go to fix one problem short term, that might create unintended consequences down the line. But color management allows us to mitigate those issues. I'm going to throw this over to Andrew to tell you a bit about this chart.
Yeah, okay.
Feel bad.
Yeah, well, the chart says what it is.
Please tell us a little bit about this chart, Andrew.
Okay. I don't really like reading slides, but I'll do so. As an example of color transformation or transform implementing creative choices, you can see some ASC CDL. They, in ARRI cameras, are applied to log C. Historically, that was a little different, but now we're doing that. In the future, we may do something different. But yeah, while you have handles, so I guess the point of this slide is to say that the availability of controls does not necessarily mean that they have either their intended use, nor that swinging those handles one way or the other will allow for a proper alignment. So if a goal of adjustments is to be able to maintain a relationship, or at least an ability to get back to scene linear, to do comps, comps are the best because you're integrating with virtual context, something that has been synthetically generated. There's a place where you can kind of twist your knobs to get to something that appears to have been correctly compensated, but you can accidentally work in some of the errors and they're really errors. The errors of any kind of presentation system. And so to avoid that, don't grab every handle unless you know what you want to do with it.
So we talked about the technical reasons that we need color management, because we want to know what we're looking at and we want to know what we're going to get. But what are the creative controls that we have with this? Color management allows us to know what we're dealing with. It allows us to know what we're playing with and what, like I said before, our limitations are. That's the best way to make creative processes go, is to know what your rules are so you can start breaking them. This gives us space and time to make those decisions with intention rather than to solve short-term problems. So let's talk a little bit about hardware-defined behaviors versus software-defined. Ultimately, all of the different pieces of the puzzle that I mentioned before, they all have hardware components as well as software. And those will have different behavior between manufacturers, different behavior between models, and understanding that can be a really large task. But having standards or having I'm so sorry about the feedback. Having standards allows us to know about what these different standardizations can do across different product lines and how they might adjust. There are different kinds of standards that will affect software level versus hardware level. One software fix for one program might not apply in the same way on a different piece of hardware. So, would you like to help me with an example for that?
No.
No, you don't? Okay, that's fine. Well, let's talk a little bit about this chart. So what we can use as an example is you can compare the native primary color temperatures for LED panels. Those will be different across manufacturers. It could be different across lines. It could be different across batches, potentially, in the manufacturing line. Understanding the native primary will allow you to align your content and know what base white point that you're going to be working towards. We'll go over this a little bit in our lighting demo as well, talking about calibrated color with our lighting systems and how you can keep all of that aligned. But here, in this chart, you can see the different spaces for Rec 2020 versus Rec 709. A software-dependent choice that will change the output on your wall and thus change the amount of color that you're able to reproduce. that is a choice that you can make creatively. You can be forced into it technically if you have not prepared adequately and there's only capability to support one color space. If you plan ahead, you can actually have the freedom to make that choice down the line and open yourself up to the creative choice of what kind of color space do you want to use. And so this is just another example of a software-defined feature, really just kind of showcasing that the different applications of these solutions might differ across hardware, and understanding the differences in products as well as manufacturers will allow you to deal with those changes. Another good point is portability. So if you're in a color managed workflow and you have to do pickup shots or reshoots on a different stage, knowing what color space and knowing what the primaries of the products you're going to be using on will allow you much more ease of use in reproducing those shots and environments instead of constantly chasing your tail or playing whack-a-mole, trying to align colors that you shot days ago. And so, why are we kind of explaining all of this? We're going to show you how that integrates with our camera metadata. So I'm going to throw it over to Andrew a little bit to talk about what we're going to show you next.
Sure. So in this particular case, I wouldn't necessarily say it is the intention to merge both metadata and color calibration or color management. We are not adjusting the Bromptons in this case. We are not adjusting the panels. We are manipulating the signal in between. So what we are, with our compensation, we are able to achieve that scene linear, which has allowed us to then manipulate scene linear in expected ways. So we can, increase stops, reduce stops, and with that alignment with physical units, we then can use the physical units that are available to us. Airy cameras, since at least the Alexa, maybe even back at the D21, they've all supported a fairly rich metadata set. So we have always had access over either SDI or in this particular case where we have built a bit of a relay into the UMC4, FIZ and serial number data, just tons of stuff in there. So from that, we are taking the iris positions, the focus and zoom positions as well, and we are playing that into the engine to then manipulate either our inner frustum or different elements of how that inner frustum is being presented. So we compensate for aperture, and you can see the wall gets brighter, the camera maintains a constant exposure. We're also compensating for CCT and tint, and still needs some work, but the ND filter selection as well. The intention of the demo is not to show a finished implementation of metadata, but it is to show the opportunities and availability of data and how they integrate together. So, well, not how they integrate, but how it may be integrated into other systems, and perhaps getting a feel for what that signal path feels like. Because at the end of the day, an integration is, it's both kind of a feel as well as a technical challenge.
A vibe, as some might call it. So right before we get into the demo, I think let's just break down really quickly a little bit more about the equipment that we're using. So what do we mean by Airy camera? What are we using here today, Andrew?
So today we have a Mini LF. That's our second most recent camera, I believe. This was following the SXTW, but, oh no, I guess it followed the LF and the whole SXTW adventure. However, when we say Airy camera, we are talking about all Airy digital cameras. So while I haven't tested with a D21, our metadata and these kinds of operations are available all the way back to the original Alexa Classic. So Airy camera is just about any Airy camera you can find with a digital sensor.
That sounds great. And then, so I have this other slide. Andrew already took us through a little bit of the metadata that the camera transmits through the UMC4. Here's another list of just some of the information, the data about data that we're able to pull through and then utilize creatively within Unreal as we see fit. And for more information, please give us a little question. Please shoot us an email, ask us, and we can get you some resources to learn more. But let's mention the UMC4. You want to talk about the UMC4 a little bit?
Okay, yeah. So the UMC4 is the Universal Motor Controller version 4. It is primarily used for the older CLM style motors. In this case, we are just using it as a metadata relay system. As a function of what it could have done or was being built to do, it has an Ethernet port, and in this case, we have rolled out some firmware that is available on the ARI.com website that allows the UMC4 to act as it's a relay of JSON data either over multicast or unicast, which can then be interpreted either in Unreal or in any other system. It's just plain text data to then get access to said metadata that's coming from it. At this particular time, we are still working on this as a finished integration, but we do hope to, with some feedback, advance this process, advance the workflow, and make it a really customer-focused and integration-focused solution for those who may want extra functionality from a UMC4.
All right, and so with all of that introduction, let's go in Unreal. This is actually an Unreal as well. This is a beautiful asset created for us by Silver Spoon Animation. This is an Unreal asset, but we don't have the inner frustum enabled. Kobe, can we get the forest, please, with the inner frustum?
I'm going to have to slide over there real fast. Excuse me for a second.
This is Mark, our great actor today for our demo. He'll be standing in camera for us. So when you come back for the lighting demo, there'll be a little set dressing, and Mark will be pretending to be a camper. So come back for the show.
All right, so as I hopefully mentioned, this is to show how we can integrate our metadata. And that's not playing.
All right. So obviously sometimes Unreal poses some technical difficulties. If anybody has had experience on a virtual production stage, you might have noticed that before. This is a new process for us. We've been working on it for the last couple of months, as well as our color management workflow, which we'll talk about a little bit as well. But what we're trying to do here is really kind of show the creative use cases for very technical information that's been integrated with our camera line for a very long time. These are particular controls that we found interesting, that we found worthwhile to study, but I think the important thing to understand and take away from this is there's a lot of data that's available to us. There's a lot of different applications that we can apply all these things to, and when you put the tools accessibly into creative people's hands, the answers will come, the solutions will come. There's only so much preparation you can do as a manufacturer for what hasn't happened yet or what's in the process of being created. So on the solutions group, what we're really trying to do is just open up those doors and open up those avenues, become an open feedback loop for people to talk about what they've done and what they want to do. and how we can all help each other do it together. So trying to keep a very open communication line here. We want to keep this conversational as well. We'll be opening up to an audience QA after this as well, and I encourage you all to come back during lunch, during our other demos, and just talk to us and ask questions. We're happy to answer anything. And anything that you didn't hear over the audio feedback, happy to show you again. So.
Okay, so now that it's working, kind of. Our background is still being worked out, so there were some technical issues this morning that we need to fix, so hopefully the next presentation will be a little smoother.
So that's why you have to come back.
Yeah. So in this case, what we're showing is that as we manipulate the iris, our background image compensates to try and maintain a constant exposure. And again, not necessarily something you may do in practice, but as far as something to tie both a color managed system and a metadata integration together, I feel that it is somewhat adequate. And we can get our CCT and tint as well. So we'll see the colors maintained. Now, the thing with our opportunities, being the manufacturer of the particular camera, is that in the management system, we can align the camera, the sensor sensitivities, with the spectral, well, not really spectral, but with the, I guess it's perceived, maybe is the right word, but it's the resulting stimulus of the camera's sensor based on the pure emitters of the LED wall. We can then combine that with what we already know about the various gain values through CCTs and white balance parameters. We put those in as constants, and we can then track through as accurately as may make sense these kinds of compensations. So while our simple inner area is maybe looking a little strange when this is working, the outer area will remain constant. So if you are setting your lighting and then you want to creatively adjust how the depth of field is going, these are opportunities that you have by playing with the metadata. If there's something in particular about the lens that you would like to either trigger a calibration based on, say, like a lens serial number or a lens model number or something of that nature, this is also available. So in this case, fairly simple stuff. Iris gets open, background gets dark, iris gets closed, background gets bright. And if we were to put false color up, we would see that it tracks consistently through the exposure range. And this also works with EI. So if I was to lower my EI, it will get brighter to maintain, once again, that constant exposure. And it's here to play with if you want to poke at it and see what it does.
So just as a final plug, our Live Link plugin for Unreal is available on our website, free to download, as well as a metadata emulator. So you can actually download this and begin playing with an Unreal yourself, even without an ARRI camera or UMC4. And I would definitely encourage you all that are Unreal programmers or like to play with it sometimes to give it a try and let us know your feedback. But
questions?
Yes,
Any
that's what I was going to
questions?
say. We're going to open up for questions now. So here, you come here and I'll walk around with the mic. Would anybody like to ask a question? Hi.
Yes. Hi. Sorry. I want to ask if we need to insert with a CGI element in post-production. If it's possible to export all these images, and if there are problems if you move the camera with the tracking or not.
So that's more of an Unreal question, but yes, there are ways to record through tape recorder, and the tape recorder, your position data, and then you can use that somewhere else. If you want to export it as an FBX, you can bring in that camera track data. Personally, I haven't done a lot with it, but in theory, it should work. But that is more of an Unreal question in the case you are using Unreal. In the case you're using another tracking system, most of these tracking systems do have an external recording mechanism. If you're using an external tracking manager of sorts, such as, do you recall the software name?
Beehive?
No, not Beehive.
Sorry.
I believe it started with a P. Anyhow, so
We'll let you know later.
one of the people with Pixera, the media server company, mentioned that they prefer to use a particular metadata management, or not metadata management, but tracking management. And this tracking manager will also record your tracking data over time. So it really depends on the solutions being implemented and the tools being used for this process. So for Unreal, it's possible. For other systems, they record it externally. And some of the tracking systems themselves will record it externally. So the answer is it depends, but mostly yes.
But there have been quite a few people investigating that and working with those kinds of workflows as well. So I think it's a question that's just continuing to evolve. You have another? Anyone?
So I think I know the answer to this question, but I assume with this data that's coming into Unreal that we can also not just change the interfrustum, but everything else in Unreal if we want to, like, have the lighting brighten up on the actor as, from the outside the interfrustum, and I assume also DMX, going out to other lights.
Yes, yeah. What you do with the data is up to you, and if I had more time, it would do that. We'll see. Maybe tomorrow it'll work. Yes,
I know,
yes.
exactly.
So the limits of the implementation of metadata or live link or any of these kinds of extended data systems is really up to time and your interest. If you've got the time and you can stay focused, you could do some really silly stuff with it.
Yeah, I think one of the main goals of this presentation for us is just showcasing this is one way that we chose to apply the data. But as ARI, we are simply providing a mechanism for receiving that data. And really, it's up to the creative team on what they want to do with it. And some data has a very clear technical purpose, has a very clear reason and where it's going to be inserted. And then a lot of other things you can kind of play around with, attaching something that you wouldn't normally expect to something like brightness or color control and creating some really interesting effects. That's what we're trying to cultivate here. So, any more questions? Yeah?
Yes, a question. And the roof LED, which for what is for the light?
So we're using Row Carbon 5 panels for the ceiling, and it's a little dim right here. You can see the moon in here. What we're doing here, one, besides providing just a little bit more atmosphere and top light, is we actually have tracking dots attached to it. So it's giving us a really nice surface for our Stipe tracking system for it to identify those points so we can bring the camera in much closer. What our lighting demo at 3:15, which I would love if you guys would come to because we're asking these questions about lighting, we actually talk about that quite a bit, about the advantages of using traditional LED fixtures in conjunction with ceiling lights. In the beginning of virtual production, a lot of people were using LED panels as light sources because it's a big light source, right? It looks like a color card, it looks like a white card. Why wouldn't you want to use it? But the benefit of using actually a full spectrum LED light is you're going to get much better color reproduction on skin, and people started to realize that very quickly. So what we are using it here for, besides the tracking, is we are adding a little bit of top light, a little bit of atmosphere, but fundamentally the majority of the lighting is coming from our sky panels and orbiters. So we're going to go through a few different Unreal scenes at 3:15 that showcase that integration more, integrated with content effects as well as just kind of pixel maps. So I'd really encourage you guys to come by, but we'll be doing that every day at 3. So any more questions? No? Okay. I guess we got to wrap it up. Thank you everybody so much for coming, and like I said, we're going to be doing this particular demo we're going to run every morning at 10:15 except for Tuesday. And then every day at 3:15 we'll have our integrated lighting demo. And we have several different Unreal scenes. We have much more content to show, so I'd love if you came back. And if you have any more questions, just come find us. We'll be right there. Thanks.
Thank you very much.
mic in each chair? Oh. 1, 2, this is a mic test. 1, 2, 3. Mary had a little lamb, piece of cheese, slice of ham. 1, 2. Hey, 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 hey. 1, 2, check. Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome to NAB 2022. 1, yep. 1, 2. 1, 2. Sibilance. Sibilance. Yep. 1, 1. Yep. You good, Ray?
It's not a big deal. Testing, testing.
Project. Talk
No
louder.
feedback.
Talk like you're talking to that lady there.
This
without a
feels very
microphone.
loud.
But they need to hear you back there.
Okay, testing, testing. 1, 2. Okay, that feels good.
Don't let that bother you. Mic 2, hand mic 2. 1, 2. You good? Going to 3. Hand mic 3, hand mic 3. 1, 2. Hey, hey. Good morning. Welcome. Hand mic 4, hand mic 4. 1, 2. Yep.
laptop, please, the resolution?
Yeah. Testing, testing. Can you hear me in the third row? Palm Springs. Oh. Oh, you're getting me to talk. Hi, Andy. How are you today? Good. Good. It's
great.
it's nice to be in the flesh, isn't it?
It's nice to be at NAB, isn't it? When's the
It's
last
fab.
time you were at NAB?
3 years ago. Yeah.
Good, Ray? Thank you very much.